Welcome to the premiere episode of our podcast, Literacy is Lit at Centenary University. I'm your host, Joe Pizzo. Centenary University's annual literacy conference is our setting today on the 7th of June, 2024, as we prepare to chat with Dr. Lexis McCoy. She is director of the Master of Education and Literacy Instruction Program and ESL Teacher Certification Program, and the founder and the director of Centenary University's Center for Language and Literacy Advancement, which is set to launch in the near future. This professional cooperative is truly not a textbook-only program. Rather, Dr. McCoy has crafted it to support the most progressive, research-based best practices in language and literacy development and instruction. She ensures that her students honor multiple perspectives within diverse instructional contexts that serve as an accessible scholarly resource to the community. Initiatives may include community events, parent, guardian, and teacher workshops, and summer practicum for reading specialists. With a BA and an MA in education from East Stroudsburg University and a doctorate from Northeastern University, Dr. McCoy has designed a comprehensive literacy program that is built upon the International Literacy Association standards, which focus on foundational knowledge of literacy instruction, curriculum design and implementation, assessment and evaluation, diversity and equity, learners and the literacy environment, and professional learning and leadership. By the way, a major portion of Dr. McCoy's doctoral thesis relies on the philosophy of Fred Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on public television. Beginning in 1995, Dr. McCoy taught first grade in the Mansfield Township School District. She was selected to take a sabbatical from classroom teaching and work as one of the first reading coaches in the state of New Jersey for the Governor's Literacy Initiative. Following that, she was reading specialist and literacy coach for 2 years in my Chester School District, and has worked as an educational consultant and professional development provider for state and government organizations. Dr. McCoy is presently the graduate director of the MED in Literacy Instruction, ESL Teacher Certification Program, teaching future reading specialists and classroom teachers. Dr. Lexis McCoy, welcome to our premiere edition of Literacy is Lit at Centenary University.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Mr. Pizzo. Before we begin, I'd like to congratulate you on 50 years of teaching. What a testament to and dedication, to the field of education. Congratulations again.
Thank you. That's very kind. I always say I'm just doing my job. I love the kids and I love doing what I do.
It is a pleasure to be here, so thank you.
Let's get right into the interview. Now, your background in literacy is unquestioned. Your credentials prove that. However, I know that our listening audience is interested in the connection your doctoral dissertation has with television's Mr. Rogers. Please tell us how you connected the two.
Sure, Joe. I started teaching when I was very young, 21. I very quickly realized that if I developed high quality relationships with children, parents, colleagues, and the wider school community, that sets an invaluable foundation for my work as an educator. You know this, right?
Sure.
To this day, whether I'm working with 6-year-olds or undergraduate college students or seasoned teachers who are attending graduate classes, building these supportive relationships is certainly a priority for me. So regarding my dissertation study, I always valued the work of Fred Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as an early childhood expert. The way he spoke to children, his intentionality, the way he promoted curiosity, the diverse cast on his program. Not many people realize that Mr. Rogers was an expert in the field of child development. He was mentored by the greats, such as parenting expert Dr. Spock. You remember him, right?
Oh, sure.
And Dr. Eric Erickson.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Rogers epitomizes that research to practice connection. Each week, Fred Rogers would have these scheduled meetings with his mentor, Dr. Margaret McFarland, about child development. And they would talk about themes in childhood, such as fear or celebrations. And then Fred Rogers would use that information he learned about through their conversations, and he would write his program each week. So it was the perfect example of what in academia we call praxis, that place where the research and theory meet practice. And that was his program. Did you know that, Joe?
I'm always interested to learn new things, and that's an interesting fact. So I'm going to hold on to that one.
Yeah, many people saw him as an entertainer, and he really and truly was an expert in early childhood development. So as my career started to change and I started to coach, I observed firsthand how critical relationships were as a foundation of any learning environment. The very best educators I observed focused on reaching children's hearts before their heads. They follow the quote, focus on Maslow before Bloom. They really focus on those developmental needs and expectations that are at the forefront of teaching. And I know when you come and talk to our student teachers, you talk a lot about that. And your 50 years experience is a testament to how important this is.
There always has to be a connection. And once that connection is made, then almost anything can be done. But until that connection is made, it's an exercise more than an experience.
Yes. So when it came to the time for me to focus my dissertation, as much as I wanted to focus on a topic specific to literacy instruction, I felt more strongly about sharing research with educators that would cross content and grade levels. And relationships are that foundation of literacy instruction. So I figured, why not start there? My study focuses on the legacy of Fred Rogers and how he's influencing relationships in contemporary classrooms. I was honored to speak with Hedda Sherapin, a member of Fred's small staff, and Dana Winters and Shelley Grooms from the Fred Rogers Institute. And then I interviewed these amazing teachers who use the work of Fred Rogers in their day-to-day classroom practice. They introduce their classes to Mr. Rogers. Some have Mr. Rogers Mondays or Fred Fridays. And the children are little scholars as they watch Fred's program and they analyze his work. And so this work sets this foundation of that mutual care in these classrooms. So my study revealed the relationship building strategies that educators are using as a result of integrating Fred Rogers into their classrooms. Strategies, and I know so much of what you do reflects this because I know you well. Speaking to children with intentionality, allowing time for organic interactions, honoring feelings as real and valued. And I know that's super important in middle school, right? The importance of imperfection. So yeah, in terms of literacy instruction and how Fred Rogers intersect, relationships matter. And that's my philosophy, and that's our philosophy at Centenary. Not only the relationships the teachers have with the students, but how the students interact with the teachers, and the students and the teachers interact with the parents, and the relationship that the children have with text and the environment. Relationships are a key aspect of literacy instruction, as well as, all learning.
Now, when you were a youngster, what type of reader were you?
So the majority of my schooling took place in the 1980s and learning from worksheets. I never really connected the magic of a book to what I was learning about in school. Reading and writing were work for me. So it was during my pre-service teacher training that our professors taught us to love literature. It was when I was teaching graduate children's literature myself that I learned about something called, the reader's identity. When I really thought about my literacy history more, I realized that although I wasn't fond of reading long novels, I'm a lover of nonfiction. And that's okay. I love to read books, journal articles, facts, anything nonfiction, and with a pen in hand, taking notes in the margin. And I love children's literature as well. But I wish, as I was young, someone had taught me that that's okay, and that my reader identity as someone who loves nonfiction was something that they could have really focused on and focused my interest on to enjoy reading a little bit more.
And those nonfiction books are written by authors who have skills that go way beyond what we would normally think of. I had the pleasure to interview Ruta Sepetys, a New York Times bestselling author, about a year or so ago. And she said that she spends sometimes months doing research. Sometimes it takes her more than a year. She'll go into archives and spend maybe 3 weeks in the archives to make sure that everything is accurate, even to the point of, if she writes in her nonfiction book that it rained that day, she wants to be sure in this historical novel that it did exactly rain on that day. And if the scene is in the morning, was it raining in the morning? So yeah, accuracy and detail are so important, and those reading skills cross over. It's not just the fiction books. You're absolutely right.
And Joe, what a great lesson in teaching children and educators how reading and writing intersect and how they rely on one another. What a wonderful lesson in writing you just gave
Definitely.
us.
Now, in today's world, we know that there are many demands, and parents and guardians work. There are extracurricular activities. Schedules are just bursting with priorities. And it's hard sometimes for parents to either read to or with their children, and guardians the same thing. So how important do you think it is for children to be engaged in this reading process? And are there a certain amount of minutes, maybe every day or every week, that parents and guardians should try to get their children to read?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is so difficult sometimes to find that time. But if I had to prioritize one activity with children, it would be reading aloud and not stopping until they're older. Um, Jim Trelease, the author of the best-selling book, The Read Aloud Handbook, is one of my heroes. I've learned so much from him, and I could probably cite Jim Trelease for all the information I'm about to share. But especially in the early years, it is critical to make reading a priority for children. Reading aloud to children from an early age, it models fluency, promotes rich conversation, helps the children realize that books convey meaning. Reading aloud to children is critical really at all ages, because the benefits are just limitless. It helps it helps develop the child's vocabulary. And not to sound cliche, but it can take a family places they might not have the means to go, or to imaginary places they might not have ever dreamed of. So I always suggest, to caregivers and grown-ups to make library part of that recreational time for students of all ages. Give each child a tote bag and let them check out books. Let them browse the discard piles at the library and take some of the books home that the library might be, throwing away, and use that local library to grow your readers. So yes, reading is critical. Reading aloud to children is critical as a home activity, creating an environment where children learn to love reading. And I wouldn't specify like a set amount of time, because, some days are busier than others. I would suggest it becomes more of part of your lifestyle, helping children connect reading books together with bonding and closeness and an enjoyment. Caregivers or parents are the ones falling asleep while the children want to read for longer. So that sets them up to do the reading at school. And then they see schoolwork is more enjoyable, and they know how to connect with books.
In your literacy program, I know that the students get a foundational knowledge of literacy instruction and how to design curricula and how to implement those designs, how to assess reading and evaluate the activities. Diversity and equity are always addressed. The learners and the literacy environment are seen as synergistic, and professional learning and leadership are paramount. So if someone comes to Centenary University to become engaged with your program and they see this comprehensive base, how would you respond to the question, why is your base so comprehensive?
It's critically important that educators are using research-based best practices in their literacy instruction. The International Literacy Association is such a wonderful resource and provides us with the most contemporary information and research available. So, in our reading specialist and ESL teacher certification, all of our classes are aligned to national standards. And so our reading specialist program is aligned to the International Literacy Association standards for professionals. We also teach our reading specialists how to follow state standards that they're going to be using in their everyday practice. And this isn't anything new. Our entire program has been built on the components of research-based best practices since its inception. The future reading specialists learn how to create a multifaceted literacy program that includes that systematic and explicit instruction you hear about so often in comprehension, phonological awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, writing, all while remembering the critical importance of things like the impact of relationships that we talked about and motivation and culture. So educators frequently comment that this intensive learning in the graduate program is everything they needed, but they didn't have time for in their pre-service teacher preparation programs.
To build on that a little bit, reading experts Laura Robb, David L. Harrison, Timothy Rosinski, they wrote a book called Promote Reading Gains with Differentiated Instruction. And one of their sections really highlights their whole philosophy. They say that independent reading increases reading volume. Now, I know that your program promotes independent and assigned reading. Would you explain to our listeners how it does that?
Certainly. So the more we provide students time to read and access to text, the more they'll read and the better they get. As future curriculum developers and reading specialists, our graduate students know the importance of authentic reading opportunities, choice, and motivation. So that independent reading is critical. And then when it comes to instructional texts the teachers are using to teach, I believe access is key. It's very important when teachers are assigning students text that it's on their reading level, that it has to do with a topic that they enjoy, that it motivates them. It's our responsibility as educators to provide students with supports so they can access text, perhaps a digital copy, because there's no benefit in assigning reading to students that they can't read. So for instructional texts, I think being very mindful of the student's reading level and what they can read with comprehension is critical. It would be like giving me a medical textbook, Joe, right? And I would put it down because I couldn't understand the vocabulary. I couldn't comprehend it. I might not be able to decode some of the words. So, if teachers are doing small group differentiated lessons, they can consider, topics that the students enjoy. They can consider reading level, just a plethora of considerations that we have to think about when it comes to increasing that volume of reading within the classroom, whether it's independent reading, at the student's choice, whether it's assigned reading.
Dr. McCoy, the place of electronics, video games, social media, and online sites of various purposes, for example, is thought by some to be a major enemy of literacy. How does your literacy program here at Centenary University address this issue?
I don't think we can consider any advancement an enemy. Just like AI, we must find ways to use it for positive outcomes. I do believe that we need to adjust as teachers of literacy because the brain is changing due to electronics and what we're reading. How often do you prefer to scroll through a short article on your phone, Joe?
I see myself doing that sometimes because of limitations of time and maybe interest level, or I find that the article isn't really addressing what I need. But building that stamina, as you and I talk about often, is important, and I'm sure you'll be mentioning that soon.
Yeah, so technology is impacting our reading stamina. For many people who were once readers of novels, we are becoming browsers and scrollers. So I think it's important we figure out ways to use school as a place to teach our students how to sustain and read longer pieces of texts and how to optimize that browsing and scrolling. We can teach students strategies that complement technology, such as how to read critically so we know where information is coming from on the internet. So, educators need to change constantly and figure out how we can use these advancements to support learning. We can't go back. We have to advance. What has your experience been working with middle school readers with this, Joe?
Middle school readers seem to have taken a bit of a change over the years, where kids were used to having a book in front of them and sitting for a length that we now consider to be almost unlikely. A kid might sit with a book for an hour, maybe 2 hours, and just be absorbed. But today's society is instant. Everything is instant. We need the answer. We need it now, or we need it yesterday, which is even worse. And so our level of patience, I think, has a lot of effect on that. And the fact that we have so many options today, we have things to do and places to go and people to see, and it just becomes almost unwieldy. And it raises our level of comfort as well. That's something that we fail to address far too often, I think, in classrooms, is the fact that kids and parents and teachers and administrators and communities are all part of a team. And we need to work together for the betterment of all. And part of that is, and I'm going to use the old cliche, stop and smell the flowers. Don't try to do everything in one day or 1 week. We don't need to know everything or be everything, but what we do know and the person we become should be based in at least something solid. And the only way to get that is by being not just a purveyor of information, but someone who has had the time and the incentive and the willingness to consider, evaluate, and then draw conclusions about that information that we've gathered.
Yeah, and definitely that reflects on our instruction and literacy. So I think things have flipped. There was a time in education where we needed to teach technology in schools. Remember those days?
Oh boy.
And by nature, children today are digital natives. They are often more technologically proficient than any of us as their teachers. So I'm thinking we may have to flip our thinking, and rather than teaching students about technology, our shift might be to teach them about books and pieces of literature and authentic writing and the arts. And it's critical to adjust so we have well rounded children, because we can't have children on Chromebooks all day at school. Then they go home to iPads and video games, and we wonder why they haven't learned to appreciate these things. So I think that children and students now more than ever need exposure throughout the school day to high quality texts, activities that build language, opportunities to interact with one another and develop that language, authentic purposes for writing. These are all the research-based best practices that we teach our pre-service teachers and reading specialists at Centenary. So, it goes back to the importance of read alouds, think alouds, using nonfiction content, area learning, teaching children the utility of literacy within things, such as how to read menus and fill out medical forms. Putting books back into the hands of students is truly how we adjust our teaching, I think, to work with these advancements. So, Joe, maybe my answer contradicts itself. While saying we need to move forward, I'm saying that we need to realize that we may need to reflect and go back to our, previous teaching practices. Do you see this a little bit?
Yeah, I think of an automobile, and even though you're driving forward, you still have a rearview mirror, and you have side mirrors, and you need to be aware of what's happening behind you and to each side of you, as well as what's happening in front of you. I think we've lost some of that perspective. The things that we used to call soft skills and now call power skills are so important, because when our students enter the world of business, the world of managing a household, there are skills that are reflective of their ability to analyze, their ability to read instructions, take instructions, give instructions. And those things are not all in isolation. And as you say, the brain is changing with the way we do things. And it's important that we read. It's important that we listen to someone read. I'm a big fan of reading to my students, but I also like to be read to as well. I've been teaching 50 years, but you can read to me and I will sit there and just absorb every bit of it, because the experience changes a bit for me. And maybe that word experience is a key here, that we need to do as well as to reflect, but not to separate those two. As we do, we need to reflect. And as we reflect, we need to decide, is there something else or a different way that we need to do whatever it is we do?
Yeah. And to circle back, to the beginning part of your question, these advances in technology are amazing and powerful, but that reflection is how we continue to maintain well-rounded instruction.
Dr. McCoy, your program at Centenary University is well respected throughout the entire academic community. And I know that your students are passionate about literacy instruction from the small amount of work that I've been able to do with them. So as we wrap up our discussion, would you please explain to our listeners why they should consider coming to Centenary University Center for Language and Literacy Advancement to study?
Sure. Centenary is a special place, Mr. Pizzo. You know that, right?
Sure.
We focus on relationships ourselves just as much as we encourage educators to focus on, the relationships they have with children and young adults. So our students will tell you that they learn the most contemporary research out there regarding literacy instruction. They leave with answers to tough questions and they can correct misinformation. These are turbulent times in literacy instruction, and there is a lot of misinformation out there. So our reading specialists leave armed with the research to be the best educators they can be and know how to explain how and why. They're provided with extensive fieldwork experiences under the guidance of supportive and highly regarded reading specialists who serve as our instructors. And, part of our program is partially online, but we still have that in-person component. So students love that supportive face-to-face community. Often people who attend our program end up teaching, in the classroom, which I see very exciting as well, because to have our classroom teachers with that reading specialist certification is wonderful. And then some of our graduates go on to be reading specialists or curriculum supervisors or literacy coaches. But I always do love to see our reading specialists who do go back to, teaching in the classroom and using those best practices.
It has to be very fulfilling to see all that come together, and sometimes even have your students come up with things that neither you nor I have thought about, and now bring back to our own students to say, here's an even better way to do what we've been doing. So-and-so has come up with this. Yeah, that's a nice feeling. Dr. McCoy, if someone wishes to reach out to you with questions about your program or literacy in general, how may they do so?
They can go on to the Centenary University website, Joe. My email address is lexis.mccoy@centenaryuniversity.edu. And they're welcome. My, information is on there in terms of how to contact me. They can call or text me. And we always welcome conversations about, not only the programs, the Reading Specialist program or the ESL program, but if they just have a question about something that's going on in the classroom or literacy instruction, we're always happy to be, the guides and that hub for the community of academic support. So yes, please contact me.
And just to add a little bit to what you've said, for those who may not know Centenary, it is a place where people hold doors for each other. It's a place where people say hello to each other. It's a place where people are polite to each other and look to help each other. So it's within that type of environment that your program flourishes. And it's an honor for me to be a part of Centenary University from the time it was Centenary College back in 1992.
Thank you, Joe. And it's people like you who make Centenary what it is, because as you know, we're not an academic institution that, only the professors get to do the work. As you said, our students are a huge part, and our students who graduate and are teaching, they present at our workshops, they come and they adjunct, they contribute and visit classes to talk to pre-service teachers. It's truly a learning community that is supportive and based on relationships.
Director of Centenary University Center for Language and Literacy Development, Dr. Lexis McCoy. Thank you so much for chatting with us on our premiere edition of Literacy is Lit at Centenary University. The program you have created is indeed in good hands.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pizzo. You're doing remarkable things to advance the field, and I encourage everyone to listen to all of your podcasts because I know I certainly enjoy them. Thank you again.
Well, thank you for your kind words. Thank you for joining us for our premiere episode of Literacy is Lit at Centenary University. Check out our literacy offerings and all that our fine university has to offer at centenaryuniversity.edu. For Literacy is Lit at Centenary University, I'm Joe Pizzo. Have a great day.